Once again, good afternoon. Welcome. I'm Dr. Tony Vrame, the Director of the Department of Religious Education of the Archdiocese. And this is my colleague, co-worker, Presbytera Aimee Ehrs, our curriculum specialist. Of course, our names are up there so you can spell them and know who to blame later. And we've got our presentation in light of the theme of the family of this year's Clergy Laity Congress about what are some of the strategies that we can use and things that we can recommend on how we can get parents and especially parents involved with their children's religious education. And our primary focus in the presentation is going to be on what parishes can begin to do as part of the parish programs that they're all providing for kids and how the parents can get involved and things like that. But also what we're hoping to do is have a conversation with all of you, because I would assume that you have some ideas as well that we hope will share with one another and learn together. And he's supposed to be here now. Father Andrew George from Cranston, Rhode Island is supposed to be with us for at least a little while. And Father Andrew's got some really interesting perspectives on this. And one of the things, and this will keep you riveted to your seats and for the next hour until he shows up, is one of the big challenges that most parishes are struggling with is the whole sports on Sunday issue. Right? Yes, everybody, yes. We know. Father Andrew and the parish in Cranston has actually worked on that. And I've asked him to tell the story of what one parish did in Cranston as a suburb of Providence, Rhode Island, to begin to deal with that challenge. And I'm not going to give away his story, but I'll let him do that. So he's supposed to be here, and if he doesn't make it, I do know the story, so I can tell it. But I'd rather let him tell the story and deal with that. So at some point, we want to have a conversation. Feel free to stop and ask questions as we go along, and we will kind of go see where this takes us. As I like to say, any kind of workshop, all kinds of education is an experiment. So this is where we're going to let the experiment begin and see where it takes us. So with that, you let me? Okay. So I was going to say, how am I going to advance the slides? I want to say that most of us probably were taught with this old model of how to engage families, that our model in churches traditionally had been the way to get to parents was through the kids. So we did all kinds of things to teach and engage the kids in religious education, thinking that it would be taking things home, as I call it up on the slide, the send things home approach, that it would wind up on the fridge or show mom and dad, this is what I made in Sunday school kind of thing. And therefore the parents would be getting the religious education piece. So, that was our traditional attitude and our traditional model. I'm going to say, because I'm seeing a lot of you taking a lot of notes, which is great, take notes, but as you can see, we're being recorded. This is all going to be put up on the Archdiocese website, maybe as soon as tomorrow, so you could watch us again, and as well with the slideshow. So you don't have to worry about trying to write all the slideshow stuff down. So if you miss something, don't sweat it. But that's been our traditional model. Seemed to be doing just fine. Probably a lot of places were reasonably successful with that. And we did spend a lot of energy trying to get to parents through the kids. Like I said, so different associations, all the different programs. But this is where we can advance the slide. We're doing it backwards. We're doing it backwards. And have been doing it backwards all these years. And a number of studies have come out in the last few years. Most significantly, Christian Smith and a team out of Notre Dame University in Indiana did a program with the largest study of youth and religion in the United States. Roughly 3,500 teenagers of all religious communities were interviewed and observed and questionnaires and all that kind of stuff. And it's a fascinating study. The book is called Soul Searching. If you haven't read it and you're doing any kind of work with kids, buy the book. It's a sociological piece. He's not interested heavily in heavy theologies and things like that. It does have a fair amount of tables and questionnaires, and you kind of jump past some of that. But it's fascinating to listen to young people talk about their faith. And his work has kind of really transformed how we understand young people, adolescents, and their relationship to church, their relationship to the issues of faith. He's the guy who gave us the famous phrase we now see in lots of youth ministry literature, moral therapeutic deism, as the religious affiliation of most teenagers today. Moral therapeutic deism, which is a whole other topic of what that means and all that kind of thing. But his observation about young people, that is why we need to change our model, is on the screen for you. The single best predictor of whether or not a young person not is connected to their church as a young person, but remains connected to their church when they become older, was the level of involvement in their faith with their parents. So when parents are involved in matters of faith, going to church and all of those kinds of things, obviously they're bringing their kids along, but it is creating the context for that young person to stay connected when they are older. And so where we're saying is now we don't want to so we need to be more engaged with parents and the religious education of their children. Now, some other stuff has come out in the last few months about what kind of families are better at this than others. And again, now some of this isn't going to be earth-shattering to you, but as you can see, it's warm families, open-minded, very loving, caring kinds of environments. Not a big surprise that those families who are then also involved in their faith tend to be more successful in handing on their faith to the next generation. And their children are much more likely to stay connected and remain involved as they mature. And this is from a book called Families and Faith, which just happens to be a title of one of the forums tomorrow. Just an interesting coincidence. And it studied families, again, hundreds of families over 40 years and multiple generations. And it watched how religious communities and how religious faith moved from one generation to the next. Really, really, really interesting kind of piece. For those of you who read Praxis magazine, I wrote a review of the book in the issue of Praxis that you can get at our exhibit booth, or if you're a subscriber, you would get it in the mail. It's in the mail to you already, so either way, you can pick that up. So you don't have to read the book this time, you can just read my summary in Praxis. But again, to show the contrast in the families, so you see warm, nurturing, open-minded families, kind of being very, tending to be, again, there are no guarantees here, tending to be successful with families, as opposed to the opposite of this. And this is just a great line from the book. You can be a really religious family, but if dad is distant, dad's not engaged with his kids, not going to work. Tends not to work. Fervent faith cannot compensate for a distant dad. And here it's not dad is not involved in church, it's that when the young people over the generations ask about their relationship to their fathers, and they report dad was rather aloof, dad was too busy with work, dad was other kinds of things, they tended not to stay connected to church. So mom and family could be theoretically overcompensating in some way, getting the kids and pushing religion and all those kinds of stuff. That's the fervent faith line here. But if dad was still too busy with work, dad was still just kind of a cold, distant dad, the families weren't as successful over time. So that's why we need to be more engaging with parents in Christian education of their children. So, what do we want to do? We want to create a supporting parent-child relationship, and we want to have active, regular participation. And again, this is one of these interesting dynamics that Christian Smith and others have discovered, especially around worship. I know I'm the director of the Department of Religious Education. I'm like live, eat, sleep, Sunday school questions. We have all kinds of resources about youth ministry here, all that kind of thing. But believe it or not, they really don't make a huge difference in whether or not somebody stays connected. What really matters is families going to worship together, attending the liturgy together, participating in the sacraments together. That is a better predictor of handing on a faith to another generation than the best youth ministry programs, the best religious ed programs, the best any program in the parish. They don't make huge amounts of difference, one way or the other. So you can even have a terrible Sunday school. If the families are still going to church, the faith continues and goes on. So we want to create this especially regular participation in worship in the community. And so that's keeping families involved is what drives all of this. And it says, and now for Father Andrew, but no Father Andrew. So we'll skip over that. So I'm going to turn it over to Aimee because she's been thinking about this piece.
So even though...
You want the microphone?
I don't know. Everyone can hear me. I hope the camera's picking me up, but if not, it'll be the internet's loss. So even though what we're doing, we're turning this around, we're bringing the families in and supporting education that way, we can take a few lessons from how parental involvement is structured and encouraged in secular education. So there's been a lot of research done with this. This is actually the federally mandated structure of what schools must do in order to involve parents. And as the mother of a daughter who just finished kindergarten, I was bombarded every single day. I was educated with, I was communicated with, I was encouraged to volunteer. They wanted to teach me the core curriculum of kindergarten mathematics, and I learned all about number sentences and all sorts of things this year. And how to encourage learning at home and trying to be, the school wasn't very good about involving parents in decision making, but they definitely did reach out to the community. So this is the federally mandated structure for what schools must do to engage parents. New studies are coming out just recently, this past year, that none of this works for the schools. We're different, but we can take lessons. This isn't working for the schools, but I think we can take these tenets and bring people into the parish, keep them in worship, keep them with us. We know that that's what works for us. We've seen the studies in families, what's it called?
Families and Faith.
Families and Faith, there is. Families on my lips so much these days with this whole conference. It all sort of becomes one. But what I was going to say is that even though these tenets don't apparently make a bit of difference for secular, for advancing test scores by the time students reach 6th grade, I think that there's a lot we can do and help us structure our thoughts. So how do we educate parents rather than just sending home something covered in glue and cotton balls, which I've done from time to time? We can share links to our own materials that we have learned, that we as teachers have used to prepare for teaching our lessons. In our teacher guides, I always try to send teachers to some free materials, some online materials, and since those are already on our computers and our bookmarks, hopefully we have our list of parent emails. We've got it's easy to zip that right out to them. That way they know we're preparing. We have a curriculum. we've prepared for this. We haven't just photocopied a coloring sheet on Sunday morning, even though we do that. And if we provide parents with both questions and answers, we know that parents are very hesitant, very tentative, very insecure in their own faith. You know, maybe they were playing soccer on Sunday mornings as children. They didn't make it to Sunday school. They don't remember it. That's fine. If we provide them with on these sheets we're sending home or in emails on a Sunday morning with questions they can ask their children, you know, in the car, wherever, and give them the answers, you know, that's bringing them into the process. That's enabling them. That's activating them. So at the beginning of the year, as you launch your Sunday school, you may send parents a preview of what the curriculum is going to look like this year, not only content-wise, but also how their children can grow spiritually over the year, depending on, you know, what age and stage they're in. The What Your Child Should Know document that we have online is very helpful for that, and also some of the religious education basics, that packet that I can point you to if I have the internet. Please come by our booth, I've got it there. Anyway, these are the kinds of things that you can put in parents' hands directly, showing them that this is the program, this is how we're doing it. And with that knowledge, they will be better, you know, able to support our endeavors. And like I said, just showing, you know, how students are changing year to year, growing in their faith. And, you know, the transition into school, the transition to middle school, and then from high school to college. If we are understanding and we are showing parents that Sunday school is also right there with their kids, that helps them out. And the second bit of this is communicating. I think this is something we all realize we need to do. We need to keep in contact with the parents. If we're doing some sort of email program, if we've got something set up, steady, regular, parents expect to see it, you know, in their inbox, on their phone, you know, they're there. They know that we expect to see them, and what's coming up, and you can give them the bullet points of your lesson, and like I said, the questions and answers again that comes up. So another, you know, clear, easy way. We do this a lot already. We know that bringing the parents into classrooms as helpers, you know, somebody needs to make the costumes for the Christmas pageant. They can chaperone field trips, and of course be involved in fundraising. All of this we know to do. In the back?
Yeah. On the previous slide there,
yes.
We say about emailing the Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
I find it more effective to email the days prior.
Right. Saturday. Yeah.
Friday,
yeah.
Saturday, because Sunday morning, you know, a lot of times people struggle with being punctual to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're going to take more time to read the emails.
They've got it on their phone in the car, though.
But I'm just recommending maybe we could say, you know, a day or two prior,
yeah.
so they can be more planned for that. Because sometimes they're wishy-washy. A parent might be, they go on Sunday,
Right.
and say, oh, the Sunday school director or the priest sent a reminder to us. It encourages them to go.
Right. It reminds them that
So
something is going on.
So just a little asterisk for that, if
Okay.
you can keep it in mind for down the road. But I find it effective even in my little community. And they,
Will you state your name and parish for the record, since the camera's not
Paul
on
Panos, St. Anthony's in Vineland, New Jersey.
Welcome,
Just
Father.
down the street from here.
you? Okay.
On the other side of the bridge.
On the other side of the bridge. So, like I said, bringing parents into the classroom, and you know, their involvement will shift as the children grow older. There's not so much need to, you know, get things ready, get cut and paste, photocopy. You know, the older parents may be sharing their own, you know, coming into the classroom as guest speakers, that kind of thing, sharing their own faith stories, their histories. Grandparents as well, especially, you know, as they come from overseas. There's a lot that they can share, not just as volunteers, but as teachers themselves. Again, empowering the parents. Clearly, learning at home is something we need to take take advantage of parents' own knowledge of their children's day-to-day secular education. Ask the parents, how our Sunday school curriculum can be hooked into their what their children are learning 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, whatever it is. For example, with the 5th grade materials that we've worked on, we know that in many 5th grades, children are just starting to study history, starting maybe doing a world cultures exploration. We take advantage of it. Kids are learning history, let's be some of the first to teach it to them. And if there are multicultural opportunities in the school, if you have a chance to just gather what your children are learning there, ask the parents what's coming home. If they've just had some sort of fair, ask that maybe was talking about the Middle East. Well, there's your opportunity right there as a Sunday school teacher to hook into what the kids are doing at home. And I've had some homeschooling families. If they have warning, if they know what's going on in my Sunday school classroom, they can carry it out on into the week. They can have their student read further or write further about, what we've studied on Sunday. And then there's, learning in daily life. I'm always asked, what do I need to give my student? What can I give them for Christmas? Have that in your back pocket. You want to have an answer right then. If they're asking, I'm going to go spend some money, I'm ready to do it, equip them with that information. And one thing that came to my mind was, these hardback storybooks, we all know how expensive those are. What if every parent bought a book and you rotated through them, especially, for the younger kids, they bring it, it's like sort of a lending library. That way, everybody gets a chance to take something, some Orthodox Christian story material home, keeping it going, as supported by the teachers' understanding of what's really, appropriate for the curriculum, what's going on in the classroom. Bringing the parents into decision making. At the beginning of the year, I usually ask the older kids, and even some of the middle grade, some of the upper elementary, what do you want to learn this year? What are you interested in? What questions do you have? Sit in the church. When you sit in church next Sunday, what question pops into your mind? Bring that to me. So let's have kids and parents discuss that together. With the What Your Child Should Know document, that can help, parents kind of preview, set the stage for exciting their kids about what's coming up in Sunday school. And you can just directly survey the parents, again, with that email. What are your kids struggling with, especially if they're teenagers? What are you struggling with as a parent, and how can we help you? And here's where I'm going to turn it back over to Tony, once we get into the next one, is how does this look in the community? How are we engaging the whole community?
Okay, thank you. And for those of you who come in late, they told you to start at 2:30, they didn't tell us.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I guess we'll do the first 5 slides over again or something. I don't know. But again, like I said, this will all be online and you can watch it again later. Again, when we start to look at how families transmit their faith from one generation to the next, one of the things we've learned, the studies are starting to show us, is obviously parents are critical, but grandparents become a critical piece of this puzzle. Now I know in a lot of our communities, grandparents are still around, and a lot of our communities are scattered. So I've extended this to think about how we think about the extended family as part of our community, and how then do we draw them into the faith? How do we engage grandparents with the grandchildren, or the aunts and uncles and nunas and nunos and everybody else in your parish that you call Thea and Theo as part of the education process? And a really important piece of doing that becomes, again, as Aimee was saying, how do you bring them involved? How do you get them involved as talking about issues of their own faith? The key here becomes that the faith is important to them. And so that we need to have them talk about why their faith is important to them, not to us, but to their children. And so to create an opportunity for them to tell their story in a Sunday school class, not read a story, tell their story of faith to their children and why this is meaningful to them, becomes a useful exchange. And then the children start making the connection that, oh, mom and dad and yaya and papu aren't just taking me to church because it's just something we're supposed to do. It's because this has value to me, this has meaning adds meaning to their lives. And so they become they become the role models for the children. Now, a lot of this isn't it's not brain surgery, but it's things that we as a community have taken kind of for granted through the generations. You know, our grandparents took us to church, our yayas and papus, that we would go to church and see uncle this and aunt that. Because of the nature of our communities are changing so dramatically in the last generation, last 20 years especially, for all kinds of reasons, we need to kind of recapture intentionally and think about it intentionally and implement it intentionally, things that we did automatically probably when most of us were younger. And so I mean, again, you think, well, that seems kind of straightforward. It is. It's just that it was an assumed reality of our communities, that when you went to church, you'd see somebody that you knew, that you related to. Now we have to kind of build all of that and bring intention and planning to it, to engage families and parents, the extended families, etc. So using them as guest speakers, getting them involved as teachers, but not the person who's writing the Sunday school lesson. Perhaps that person who's going to come in and share that my faith is important to me because this is how it plays out in my work, how I deal with these kinds of questions. And to start role modeling this, probably for themselves in some ways, because sometimes they hadn't thought about it in these ways, but so that their children and the young people in their parish begin to see that this has value to us as adults. The final piece here is kind of children beginning to show what they're learning. One of the great challenges we know we have in religious education in our parishes is that when all the child comes home with is something that they created, as I like to say, the better uses of glitter and glue that Sunday school has become in so many places, parents start to go, well, what's really going on there? It looks like all the kids are doing is creating stuff and coloring stuff. I have no problem with creating stuff, coloring stuff, making stuff. But as the late great religious educator Jane Fontana used to say, Sunday school is not an arts and crafts marathon. And it's got to be built into the program and be connected to the program, not an add-on. But what happens is we have to begin to find ways for the children to begin to demonstrate what they're learning to the whole community. And again, over time, as they were to get, Father, I'm going to say this will be on the Archdiocese website too, so you don't have to try to write down every word. Oh, good. Well, glad you're something is doing that. I figure it's just all the caffeine they keep giving us. As the community begins to see children actually learning something, demonstrating what they're learning to the community now starts getting the message very, very gently, very subtly. Something quite valuable and important is going on when those kids are being dismissed for class. It's not just the arts and crafts marathon. And so, a couple of examples that we've been telling people about, and they've been trying it out and going, oh my gosh, this is making a little bit of a difference, moving the needle a little bit. For example, we teach the Lord, all the first graders, second graders are learning to recite the Lord's Prayer. It's not uncommon to have somebody, an altar boy, lead the congregation in the Lord's Prayer. Well, maybe every now and then you could have those little kids who have just learned it lead the congregation in the Lord's Prayer. Yeah, there's lots of cuteness to this, and everybody's ooh and eyeing, look at little Johnny and Mary, getting up there and all that kind of stuff. But they will have recited the prayer. They get to do something that they think of as important. And obviously we all want to know the Lord's Prayer, but the message is our children have learned this. and now they're demonstrating it to the community. A second example is a bit older. One of the themes in grade 5 and a regular theme in the Sunday school curriculum that we create are the lives of saints and important figures in the life of the church. So a number of parishes have started creating something called a Saints Fair or a Festival of Faith. They have lots of clever names for it, where a certain class or two will focus in on their patron saints. And they make posters, and so they put an icon or draw a picture of their patron saint, tell a little bit about their patron saint, then a written piece that's on the poster, and maybe something of how they're connected to that saint, why they're named for it. I'm named after my grandfather, or this saint is, I learned this about this saint, and it's kind of something that I value, is important to me. So you see kind of the picture of what the young person is learning, but they put it on a poster, and it doesn't hang in the classroom. You put it in your fellowship hall. And at coffee hour, the classes that have done this are lined up by their posters, and this is where the clergy jump into line, and this is where the parish bulletin jumps in and says, you know, the 5th graders have their posters about their patron saints in the fellowship hall. Why don't all of you, after you've received your cup of coffee and picked up your donut, go around and talk to the kids about their poster. Talk to them about their saint. Let them tell you the story of, I'll just pick on mine, St. Anthony. Let them tell, and then just leave it up there. Again, you see what's going on. Kids are teaching the parents are getting involved in seeing what their children are learning, and the children are demonstrating what they're learning to the congregation. And the child has to take a little bit of ownership for it, because you're kind of putting them on the spot, making them stand by their poster and say, this is my saint, here's his icon, and all those kinds of things. And they begin to express it, and they have to kind of memorize it to a certain extent and take on some ownership into it. A third one, of course, is the Oratorical Festival. The Oratorical Festival is a huge opportunity for young people, especially junior high, high school students, to take some ownership and demonstrate what they've learned. We just had the National Festival a couple of weeks ago in Cleveland, and the Cleveland guys, if you're in the room, you did a great job. Yay! Yay, Cleveland. Cleveland does rock.
Every school is rock.
Yeah. And the first thing that anybody who listens to the young person talk at the oratorical is how these kids have matured on a question of their faith. And again, this becomes one of these important rites of passage, especially for a young adolescent, to claim ownership of the faith that they've been given, and to claim ownership by saying something about it in front of an audience. It's a rite of passage that everybody has to take some ownership for this and steps forward and says, yes, I'm an Orthodox Christian in the 21st century, and this is what it means to me, which was one of last year's topics. The civil rights movement was another popular one. It was another popular topic this year because of the 1964, 50, those kinds of things. And they take ownership, but they're communicating it to others, and that becomes the key piece. Now, for those of you who are teachers, one of the things, of course, we know we're looking for are these opportunities for the behavioral change, as the teachers would like to call it, in the young people. Now, behavioral change in religious education is a bit of a challenge at times. How do you do that? But owning our faith, speaking about it, writing about it, becomes a way of showing the impact that this is having. And again, mom and dad become very, very proud of what their children are learning, and they're realizing something important is probably going on when they're sitting down with that Sunday school class doing something together. And then at a parish level, you publish it, you post it, you put it up. My parish did the Faith Festival this year with their 6th graders, and the posters are still up all over the fellowship hall. A month after the event.
The pictures are on the website.
The pictures are on the website, the kids doing things. and then in using the parish newsletters or the parish electronic messages, here's the message from the kids that are recorded, post-published, all those kinds of things, again, to kind of lift this up. And what we do is that by recognizing people who are doing these things, all of a sudden now kind of the whole level of parish involvement, the whole level of communication is being ramped up. This year, related to the Rhetorical Festival, we did this poetry and essays. All the poems and essays that we got at our office at the end of the process are all going to get published to share. And Father Nick Samaras was one of the poetry judges, and one of the first things all of us, because we saw him first, like, wow, these poems are pretty amazing. A 16-year-old wrote that? There's some real depth of thought going on in the mind of that 16-year-old. And we're going to post that and share it with our whole church. But you don't need to wait for me to do it at a parish level. That can be posted and shared and put in the newsletter. Again, my parish back in Boston at the end of the Sunday school year, over a series of weeks, has the kids come up and do something. And one year, one of the teenagers had written a song about his faith. Written a song. And he came, it was outside of liturgy, and he comes and sits on a three-legged stool, brings his guitar, and is saying his song about what his faith meant to him, to the whole congregation. And people were just kind of blown away. Hey, he sings beautifully, plays the guitar well, and you're like listening to the words, and like, wow, this kid is thinking about it. And you're just kind of just taken aback that they are wrestling with these questions. And our churches are not giving our kids enough opportunities to communicate that to us, and for us as the adults to say, amazing, thumbs up, and to realize that this kid is going to take another step forward, whatever that will be. So figuring out ways for young people to communicate what they're doing, what they're learning, what they're beginning to think about becomes important in the life of the parish. And we have it's pretty easy to get them together and let them put it on the website, put it in the bulletin, put it in the parish newsletter, all of these kinds of devices that can allow them to communicate that as well. And of course, now in some levels you might have to get some permission if it's a younger child, if it's videotaped and things like that, to make sure it's okay with their parents and things like that. So you have to be a little sensitive to those things. But it's certainly internally to demonstrate that. Related to this then too is then, how do we be the parish communicating who's responsible for this work in the community? Again, another piece of information that I've come across over the last few years is when parishes publicly recognize the adults who are involved in various ministries, publicly thank them, publicly praise them, call them up in front of congregations and embarrass them about the good work that they're doing, put their pictures in the parish newsletter, put their pictures on the parish website, the adults begin to report that this parish means more to me. And they say that they are realize that they are growing in their own faith, because all of a sudden they begin to be recognized. It was really interesting. I was at the Holy Apostles Church in Westchester, Illinois, 2 winters ago. And over a couple of parish newsletters, they acknowledged all the Sunday school teachers. They hadn't heard me recommend this. They just thought it was a good idea. Good ideas do get around. And it was really clever, because one of the teachers came up and he said, oh yeah, we do this all the time. And they showed me the newsletters, and there was the little picture of the Sunday school teacher, and Mr. Pappas teaches 5th grade. This is what he does for a living, kind of stuff. And the parishioners, says, I never even knew who the Sunday school teachers were. This is cool. I didn't know you taught Sunday school. What a great thing that you're doing. That's got to be a lot of work, 1. And then they joke with them saying, now I know who to blame. But 3, they also didn't know what this guy did in the rest of his life. And so it helped build the whole congregation up to know that not only does Mr. Kappas teach Sunday school on Sundays, this is what he does for a living. And it just helped. It's like, wow, this is really cool. And I said, well, and now they're actually putting it on the parish. They've got some flat screen TVs in their hall. And they're doing the same thing just to acknowledge people and say, thank you very much, you know, kind of moment. And people are beginning to recognize one another, not only that they just show up in church on Sunday, but they're contributing to the life of the congregation. And again, the young people will also begin to see that this has value. Our priest is getting up and is thanking these people for doing these things. Our priest and our congregation is recognizing these people. It's not just a kind of this low level of activity. So again, it's intention, it's recognition, and a lot of communication about these things. And so I was one thing that Aimee just said about communicating with the church to the parents. One other variant of that is to have each teacher communicate to the parents of the children that they're teaching, and basically dovetailing off of what Father Paul said, just as long as that teacher tells the parents that he or she is responsible, you're going to get an email from me probably on Saturday or Thursday, whatever it is, that becomes the key. And that way it's not just I'm getting this blast email about everything that's going on. I'm getting this one email to 10, 12 parents who my children are getting to know, and the email that's important to me is what my child is learning. And that becomes the key here.
I always forget that some Sunday schools have more than one class.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Not mine.
Not Aimee. President Aimee's works for the department from Burlington, Vermont, where there's what, one class?
One class with 2 tables, 15 kids from ages 4 to 13.
There you go.
It's a service.
If she can make it work, anybody can make it work, right? So this idea of communicating just to my little group becomes important, and just knowing what to expect. And again, if your teachers go, oh, this sounds like too much work, I'm kind of old-fashioned technology. Think it should be no bigger than what would fit on the visor of your car. So that you could, if you had to print it up, you can stick it in the visor, and you can be cheating while you're driving, what they ask the kids, and the little bullet points. Doesn't need to be the Encyclopedia Britannica every Sunday morning about the lesson. It's the 3 bulleted points about what's going on. So, we want to get more about involving parents, but Father Andrew George, as promised, has arrived.
Why did you talk about it before?
Well, we weren't sure when you were going to be here. We promised that you'd be here.
Thank you.
We had a prompt for you way back.
And we had a prompt for you kind of in the middle. Thought it would be a good segue between things, but that's okay. As I said before, you all found out you should begin at 2:30, but those of us who were leading these things, we didn't get the message.
Oh.
So it's okay. It's not
I'm
the end
still
of
late for 2:30.
not the end of the world.
Because of the craziness that goes on.
They said they were all delayed.
Well, but I mean, you know. So, anyways, I think Father Andrew George,
You have to say it.
is
The parish priest.
Parish priest, the Annunciation Church in Cranston, Rhode Island. That's enough. We'll just leave it at that. A legend in his own right. So,
I met Tony when he was at Ionian Village.
in 19 something.
Thank you for the opportunity to share, and although I'll share a few things of what we've tried to do in the parish I serve, is it okay that...
Just as long as you're kind of in the middle so that we can see you on camera.
Oh, okay. We'll just kind of move that light away, right? Or can we shut that light off since you...
Yes, let's shut it off. I'm trying to make it so you're not on the blue screen, and it looks like you're ready to do some Star Wars or Spider-Man.
But if it's okay if other clergy or other lay people in the room also share what they're doing.
And it's being recorded. I'll transcribe it and add it to this slide. So,
I think it's crucial that we, of course, would reach out and keep parents active, because as silly as it won't sound, is we don't have the children without the parents. But I think what has often happened, we tend to segregate the children away from the parents in the official church school program or Sunday school program, as we might commonly call it, and we have them separate, and the parents are elsewhere. And I think there's time to have children separate, and there's time to have parents separate, and there may be times to have parents, alone as well. But the key here is how to keep the parents involved in the program that we have for the children. So I already heard that Tony was saying about emails, I guess. We've started that in my parish as well. We have the individual teachers work hard to get the emails of their particular students and their parents. So there's that direct classroom to those kids. But we also have the whole church go on email. That is, when I say on email, as many parents that would give us their emails. I don't know if any other parishes have this experience, but everyone doesn't want to give out their emails because they don't want to get all the stuff that is sent to them. So we don't have 100%, but maybe we have about 80%, I'm going to guess 75 or 80% of the households in reference to get the full church school listing. The teachers, I think, are more successful in getting the per classroom emails. So they have, I think, a higher percentage. And there is a weekly message that goes out from the majority of those classes. The other things that we've done is at registration, we do have an annual registration, although we keep everybody in church school while they're still within the public school system. So we have classes for pre-K all the way through 12th grade. So we move everybody up a year, of course, the new year, but we still try to have this annual registration process. Truth be said, those older grades, older kids that have already been in the program for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 years don't tend to fill out the annual registration. But we push it hard because that's where you update, the telephones or the emails and things like that. But on that annual registration, there's also a section, parents willing to help. And if you're willing to help, we also ask, what aspects are you willing to help? Willing to help means not so much as teachers, because I tend to handpick the teachers. I have never, and excuse me, I hope I'm not offending anybody, I've never put in the newsletter public announcement, we need teachers for Sunday school, or we need a 6th grade teacher, things like that. I've never done that in my priesthood. So I always handpick the teachers. But in trying to get parents, we do have this annual form that says, is a parent willing to help? Now, the areas that we have them help are, sometimes there's a particular festivity that the church school will have, so we need people to help set up the tables, or decorate the tables, cook cupcakes or some kind of food, or sandwiches, and serve and clean up, and that kind of thing. Often it's artwork, especially teachers that are very talented with art, to decorate the rooms, to come and decorate the rooms with beautiful, attractive things, age appropriate. The hallways we try to do, et cetera, et cetera. Every year we don't always get those volunteers, but we do try. We had this year, for example, a faith celebration. It's sort of a show and tell, like a science fair was the first time we did it. And again, we needed the parents at large to help kids that maybe needed assistance in whatever they were going to create, whatever they were going to do. So this is sort of a sampling of that form that says parents willing to help. So theoretically, they don't know what they're signing up for until they check off the box, and then we follow up and tell them these are the things that we're looking for this upcoming year. And believe it or not, parents will respond. We have on average maybe about 140, 150 kids, and we'll probably get 15 to 20 parents responding that they're willing to help and check off that particular form. Another thing we do with the parents is have a direct, hard mailing to all the households that have children in church school. So almost monthly, if not monthly, at least every 6 weeks, I have a mailing that goes out, keeping the parents informed of what's happening in church school. And sometimes, I shouldn't say sometimes, always a message that's geared to that particular time of the year, some religious message from me, and giving little vignettes of what's happening as well in church school from the kids' perspectives. I tend to do that. Someone might say, why are you still doing it and spending money on postage and paper when you have the email group? Because I don't believe that everybody reads the emails. I think we used to talk about email, and now people are so saturated, they don't read those emails. Now, I don't know that they read the hard mail either, but at least I feel comfortable that I did my job. So I put it out by email and I put it out by hard mail. So no one can complain later when they say I didn't know. And sometimes I say, well, excuse me, I sent you hard mail, I sent you email, sorry you didn't know. I know how busy your life can be, but that's what we do. Speaking of these things though, it doesn't mean it succeeds. I don't know if we want to talk about the things that fail also. I said to Donna the other day, can we talk about the things that fail?
Not yet.
Not yet? Oh, then I can sit down.
You have a much longer list?
No. No. Again, I'll say one more. But you have your time constraint. I've tried to have parent meetings, parent sessions. And well, I'm sorry it's going to be a failure, but there are those who do come. I learned to piggyback because I had these separate dates and times set, and a modest number would come. So I said, let me piggyback dance troupe practice. We have a very big dance troupe in the parish. Like 90 kids, 100 kids, it varies from year to year, but it's hardly ever under 90. So I said, well, the kids are practicing, the parents, a fair number stay. Some drop them off and leave, but I appeal to them to stay. Even though they're in the same building, just a hallway down, 10% of those parents would come into the room for the parents' meeting, and the other 90% are just sitting at a table, watching their kids practice or on their little, phones and things like that. And it's so frustrating, so frustrating. I've even then gone into the hall where they're dancing and interrupt the dance troupe and make an announcement. Please, parents, come and join me, and other parents, down the hallway. 2 might get up even when I go in to make the announcement. They look at you like I'm from Mars.
We have that, but
Yeah.
don't feel bad.
But the parents that come, we have a great dialogue. They're the parents that are hands-on. They're the ones that are there all the time. They're the ones also asking the questions, because it ends up becoming like a parenting session where the parents talk about what they're doing with the kids and things like that, so I give them thoughts and advice. So like everything else we do in the church, we provide the opportunity for some growth and improvement, and we rejoice for those that come, and just pray and try again for those that don't, and maybe come up with creative ways that we can get them. So that's the dialogue, or whatever Tony's format is.
Sunday morning sports.
So I have at least 10-15 minutes for that?
Yeah.
That's a whole separate topic. Thank you. They ran an outline of what we did in Cranston, Rhode Island, like 20 years ago with Sunday sports. In brief, we were successful for about 2 or 3 years after about a whole year campaign. It took about a year campaign in which we locally got the Catholic parishes in town. Of course, there's the one Greek Orthodox parish in the town. The mainline Protestant parishes. We got them together, and the Jewish synagogue actually. In the Jewish synagogue, there were 2 synagogues together to address this issue. We had a successful effort because the mayor of the city also was on board with this topic, that sports should not be on. We came up with the phrase Sunday morning until after 12. And even the Catholics went with that, because a lot of the Catholic parishes, in Rhode Island at least, have gotten away from, it was traditionally Wednesday night catechism to prepare for their confirmation. And they were having their confirmation classes on Sunday. Not every single parish, but a good number, but was having them on Sunday. So they were concerned about the Sunday sports as well, even though they normally have the choice of masses. We called parent meetings in each individual parish called parent meetings, asking the parents to also be vocal on this, because these leagues, the city leagues, will respond more to parents than they will to clergy. Again, in each parish, a handful of parents responded, but at least we had some grouping of parents that were willing to be vocal and speak about it. Small minority. But it worked. It ultimately then fell apart because no one was there to hold the banner, to follow through on holding up the banner. It's a big issue, I think, for all of our cities. It's still something I think that we should try and repeatedly try. I've been telling my parents in the parish, let's create our own leagues. Because I say, find a league that doesn't play on Sunday. You know, so we can't find them. And I say, well, let's create our own. Group, you know, yourselves together and create your own league. So there's a non-Sunday playing, non-Sunday practicing league, or at least, you know, later in the afternoon. Right now, the Orthodox Clergy organization in the state, so this isn't just City of Cranston, but the state of Rhode Island, we had a meeting with the Roman Catholic Bishop of Providence, which of course means the whole state, to come on board with us as two groups, like especially one of the Catholics. I'm the one pushing this. Because if the Catholics would speak stronger on this, I think we'd find change. And it took me 3 different meetings with the Catholic bishop to get him to agree that we come up with a joint statement and some joint campaign. So we're in the process of creating that now. In fact, just last week I finished a draft. He asked me to put a draft out for review. So I hope something might happen. I can't report on that yet, but it takes grassroots people to try to exert change. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I was hoping I could ask you a question. I was impressed with the fact that you seek out teachers. You don't just let anyone who just wants to sign up and all. What kind of quality or character traits are you looking for someone who's teaching religious education? Something specific?
Yeah. People who come to church a lot, people who I believe to be faithful and basically conscious of Orthodox tradition, whether they were schooled in it or not. Right? Schooled by life, technically. What I mean is, I say schooled, whether they have a theological degree or not, but at least the piety, you can tell they were raised in the church. But also people who are teachers by profession in the secular world. Now, all of my teachers aren't professional teachers. We don't have enough of them. Because all professional teachers don't come to church a lot either.
Do you interview them?
Excuse me?
Do you interview them?
I guess. I never thought of it as an interview, but I kind of I would call them or see them in person somewhere and ask, you know, I'm thinking that you would make a good teacher, and sit down and talk about it separately, what would it entail, so that they can also understand the time constraints and preparations involved, and give them a feeling of what's the required of them for the 30 or 32 weeks of Sunday school and stuff like that. So I guess it's an interview indirect. They're interviewing me too, and what my expectations would be. So I guess it's a two-way interview. And then I always end the session, be it in person or by telephone, do not tell me yes today, even though I'm asking you to take this. I say that do not tell me yes, but do not tell me no. I think on it and pray on it, and let's talk again in a week or two.
I would interject, to be honest, I look for people to come to confession. People that I know are praying. I mean, I think I'm sure those are factors as well, but that's just the point.
I'd like to also interject that some of our best Sunday school teachers are those who have converted to our faith.
Right.
And we use them, they're fantastic.
Yeah, because they're learning. Because of the conversion process, they had to be educated in it. Where for those of us that grew up in it, we lived it rather than necessarily learned it, information-wise. And so, yeah.
Now, this is an old saying, the best way to learn a subject is to teach it.
Teach it, right. That's very true. Very, very true. But
I've also tried with teachers is almost all of my classrooms I have co-teachers. So it's a little bit easier for a particular person to say yes when they know they have a co-teacher. And then I let each group of co-teachers fly with it themselves, meaning sometimes they both go every Sunday, or sometimes they schedule themselves and rotate.
right. And let me add to what Father Andrew's saying. It's also important with the teachers, just like it would be, let's say, with your youth advisors, to get them together periodically, not just to figure out the calendar, a meeting to have the calendar figured out, but to teach them as well. And to study something together, to explore a question, whatever it is, again, their own, as adults, they can tell you, well, this is what we're a little unsure about. what can we do about this question, whatever it is, or we'd really like to do something, so that so that they are being equipped as teachers at a local level. Now, it doesn't have to be onerous. It doesn't have to be mandatory weekly 3-hour class sessions. We're not running, graduate schools of theology in our parish. But the getting together periodically to talk about issues of faith, to study an issue of faith on their own, might be related to something that they're going to be teaching. It might not. Again, this is where the adults can be really helpful. They can tell you about those things, so that they themselves are growing in their faith. Because yes, they need to be knowledgeable, and they don't, but again, this is what's interesting. If they're growing in their faith, even in a very informal kind of way, they're going to feel more confident as teachers, working with kids, answering the hard questions that kids like to ask, and then they'll feel more confident and want to stick with it. Again, I'll pick on a parish in my neighborhood, back in Boston. The St. Ignatius Parish in Roslindale, and for those of you who are familiar with Boston, might have all kinds of crazy images of this parish.
Many true in the past.
And many, yeah, and it may have been true a generation ago, but not so much anymore. But it does have a reputation of being a fairly ethnic community. I think that I think if Father Babis was here in the room, he would agree with me. But they have brought this level of intention and organization to their youth ministry work, where once a month, as they're preparing kind of for the next round of whatever it is that they're doing with the kids, they are studying a question of the faith that's connected to that, and equipping the group to kind of minister to these kids really, really, really effectively. And they have no trouble getting volunteers. They have lots and lots of kids. And again, those of us who spend any time in Boston have an image of what that community is all about, would realize that they are doing something really, really innovative. By equipping people and inspiring the adults who then become the role models for their kids. But they work at it. And again, it's not just about figuring out what they're going to do next for an activity, but really turn it into an activity of learning about their faith and that they're going to share with their kids. And so this becomes this important dynamic that the adults in the community are taking their faith seriously, sharing it with young people through whatever the ministry is, religious ed, youth ministry, whatever the program is. And again, it's beginning to affect the whole community in that regard. That the kids are seeing the adult role models take their faith seriously. So with the religious educators that Father Andrew's gathering, they've got a fairly good-sized program that they're constantly working to equip those teachers. And this is where, those of you who are clergy in the room, this is where your skills are going to get used the most, but there are going to be other people in the community as well that can help with that. So to kind of raise everybody's level of understanding of what they're doing, how they go about doing it. Yes, and I was going to say we've got plenty of time still for questions and conversation about these things, so you can go for either for Aimee, for Father Andrew, or myself, and all we'd ask is introduce yourself.
My name is Theodora Sergio. I'm from Toms River St. Margaret Church.
Hi.
I teach 5th and 6th grade, and what I would like to see, and I'm not sure who I should say this to.
Say it.
I would love to see on a national level some type of guidance and structure saying when you finish kindergarten, end of the year, these 3 things you should leave. Finish 1st grade, these 3 things. Because everyone seems to be doing
their own
whatever they feel like doing. This year,
the
3rd and 4th graders did Saints all year, which is wonderful, but up until this point they did not, and I didn't really find out until towards the end. So my lessons that I've been doing the past couple of years, where the second half of the year we concentrate on Saints, next year I'm going to have to totally redo because they just spent all year doing Saints.
Sure.
So I would love to see guidance where
there is.
The teachers, but we're not giving that.
Okay.
Nobody has given
trying to
it
pull it up.
to us.
We're trying to pull it up. There's actually a document on our website called
So
"What
that-
Your Child Should Know."
And I mentioned it a couple
And
times, but I didn't have the slide.
and what it has done, and here's the challenges when you say national. Here becomes the challenge, but
Not-
oh, yeah, I know what you, but I know what you mean. No. Here's the.
This is
So what we
you
have
teach
done.
this year, next year, so that you don't overlap and you don't.
So
children miss out.
what we have done at the department is basically looked at the existing religious ed materials from from kindergarten to 5th, 6th grade, and we're constantly adding to it as we keep developing newer things and things like that. And what we have done is kind of just read through the texts and use that as the basis for what your child should know, so that if you as a teacher or that child or that student only read the content of that particular book, here are the saints that they would encounter, here are the basic concepts that they would encounter and learn about in the life of the church, or what we believe about Christ, or something like that, and leave it kind of at that level, so that you can think in those kinds of terms. So that, oh, in grade 4 they did this, and in grade 5 they're doing that, and that way over time you can actually kind of see the whole breadth of how we're trying to introduce the concepts of our faith, the saints, the liturgy, etc., to children from all ages. And so it's there. Now, the thing we can't account for, and this becomes the national challenge, is how a parish is going to implement something, what they're going to actually do with all of that, and the other stuff that all of our parishes incorporate in their religious education work. So so something as simple as, in this year our kids include X. That might be very peculiar, unique to your parish, but that's different from somebody else's. I just can't account for that. I mean, 550 people telling me, kind of thing. But at least at a basic skeletal structure, here's the concepts. Again, the language of education here would be the learning objectives, the scope and sequence for that particular grade.
So is this a scope and sequence? Is that
Essentially, without getting too fancy with it, because unless you're a professional, you could kind of.
Where is this to be found on your website?
It's
Let's just give me the
Resources for supervisors.
What am I, the www dot?
www.goarch.
No, religious ed.
religioused.goarch.org.
Hold on, www.religioused.
religioused.goarch.org. And that gets you to the department office stuff. And then you find the resources for supervisors, right?
And it's right at the top. I'm going to bring it to the fore of the website.
And you get this document. So you can see, if you just read Unit 1 of Me and My World, those are the basic concepts you encounter at a first grade level. And we do that all the way down. So here's what you encounter in Unit 2, Unit 3. And then if you scroll down, stop, back up. You see, here are the Bible, here are the hymns that we would think that you're teaching, so that the child should know Pistis Vias at the end of first grade. And here are the Bible stories that they're going to encounter, that they could be knowing something about in grade 1. And we've done that all the way through. And then we continually update it based on, so for example, we've got a new 5th grade book, we're going to update it based on the new content that we're adding and things like that.
However, it hasn't changed.
Right, the basic stories, but there would be some new material and things like that. So Father Pandeliman, and then all the way in the back.
How do you factor that in when you've got all pages in one room, like yours? Because that seems real easy when you got giant, super huge parish. I've got one room with about
I know what you got.
kids, and they're all the way from 6th grade to 4 years old.
That's actually, this becomes a...
And I'm going to say one more thing. We just had a Sunday school meeting the other day, and the director said, I showed her the religious education catalog, and she said, I hate to say this, but she said most of this stuff's worthless because of the fact that we have all these kids in one grade. She said most of this stuff's targeted at one grade. That was, those are, I don't think she said they were worthless, but she basically disregarded the catalog.
Yeah.
It's very challenging, like you heard me say, I have.
And that's gotta be
situation. Yeah.
more
Well-
parishes than have a great,
Yeah.
I'm
And
guessing
so-
the majority of parishes have a little house on the prairie set up and not a Holy Apostles in Westchester set up.
Or at least 3 grades in a
Yeah,
certain
something
class,
like that.
You know, and it's
Yeah,
adaptation.
and one of the things we know we've wanted to work on is this kind of how to do it when you've got multiples and things like that. The advantage, and again, this is where when you begin to look at these materials, grades 1 through 5 especially, they're basically are organized the same way. So if you're into social studies language, what they call in social studies education, what they call expanding circles. So it starts as very close to the life of that student, and then gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the world around them. So they're organized very, very similarly. So it would actually be possible to combine more effectively at least that, and then you're just allowing the young person to kind of do the piece that's age appropriate for that child. The world of a first grader is obviously a little bit smaller than the world of a fourth grader. So you kind of can work on those kinds of things. But we know that is a kind of a weakness of the program that's developed over the years. And that's why we're actually trying to make a new one
And
that deals with
by the
it.
booth, let's talk specific strategies.
Yeah, that deals with that problem better. So we're aware of it. So, yes.
First of all,
Introduce yourself.
My name is Dimitri Virginis from Massillon, Ohio. And part of the building was all my question because we have 3 classes, 1 through 3,
Yeah.
4 through 6, and then high school.
Yeah.
And we're running the same problem. You have done an amazing job putting this curriculum together. The teachers run it and can use it, so they're trying to put together sources.
Yeah.
To get that. And I'd like to hear a little bit, how you handling everybody in Maine, or Miss Maine?
Vermont.
Vermont, sorry. It's actually one class, because this is amazing class.
So,
You can say as much as you want.
okay, no, I couldn't hear the question. I'm
Same
sorry.
problem.
How do you handle that? Do you use this curriculum? Are you doing anything different?
What I've done
Get in the middle.
is, more or less, I mean, this was my first year doing it in this particular parish. I found that because these books do introduce, you get the sacrament of baptism introduced several times over the course of the program. If I'm able to pull that out of the first grade book and the 5th grade book, I've got 2 tables going. I've got sort of a 3-year cycle plotted out of, okay, this year everybody's going to study Great Lent this year at their level. And then next year we're going to do Holy Week. And then the year after that we're going to focus on the parables, something like that. I've got it plotted out where we're hitting the highlights of these, with the materials drawn for whichever kids I happen to have that week, that year. I've got a bunch of 9-year-olds right now, massive 9-year-olds. So just, knowing the individual kids is really going to help you structure a program. Pulling bits and pieces, it's really hard.
Should the director contribute directly for some support in that? And you would the department.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I still can't hear you.
Should the director of religious education of parish or parents contact you directly with those kind of questions? Because they'll get overwhelmed.
Definitely. I mean, we're in the booth and call us. I mean, that's why we're there.
Yeah, both here, if you're here, stop by. Amy will be there and others in the office, that we've kind of do that. But that's why our office is there. We've got, between phones and emails and things like that, we are there to help in any way we possibly can. But just out of curiosity, it's kind of a quick survey here. How many other parishes would you say, how many of you in the room would you say that describes your situation combined and things like that? So, okay.
And
Yeah.
one thing I have added to the catalog, there is a lot that's useless for such a small program, but something that really grabbed me over the last couple of years are supplementary resources written by Protestant groups, all in one Sunday school or all together now, that are giving you ideas. You can draw some of their activities that are great from mixed age groups, build them into our scope and sequence, whatever Orthodox program, but it'll give you really great ideas of how to do multi-age learning in a classroom, supplement your program that way.
Yeah. Flip your coin and then
do we do anything for adults for religious education? Because you talk about kids, and that's great. I just don't know if this is the right department or the right place to ask questions.
Yeah, we are the right department to ask.
Okay.
We do, yeah, the Archdiocese doesn't have an adult religious ed department. We just have, you've got 2/3 of it standing in front of you. So we do not have a specific program for adult religious education. Let me tell you why. Adults have a great capacity that young children generally don't have. They can tell us what they want. And so what really boils down to with adult religious education is gathering adults together and then the leadership in the parish to say, okay, what do we want to do? What are we capable of doing? Now, tomorrow's workshop with Jerry Clenaris, he's going to talk about some of the things that they're doing at St. Ignatius in Charlotte that are very much geared around adult religious education. They probably have one of the finest adult religious ed model parish programs in the Archdiocese. So he'll be sharing a lot of that tomorrow in the workshop tomorrow afternoon. So you can hear about that. But to quickly answer, very general, with adults, you just put them in a room over coffee and say, what do you want to do? And how do you want to approach it? And it really just takes a little bit of leadership there at the part of the adults, because they have the capacity of telling us what they want. They have the capacity of working together. Then they don't need as much direct intervention, that's educational language, of a teacher to say, okay, now we're going to do this and now we're going to do that. And so it really just becomes a matter of just bringing some energy around it to do that. And again, now St. Ignatius has put together a whole program of that, but other parishes, for example, just have 2 or 3 different adult religious ed groups that get together on Sundays or Tuesday mornings, all those kinds of things as kind of a way of doing it. So again, it's not one of these things where you have to make specific programs specifically targeted to adults. So you just matter to bring some energy. Yes, and introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Martha Pantelidis.
Say that.
Martha Pantelidis from Annunciation in Norfolk. I applaud your efforts to differentiate. As a teacher, I can really appreciate you trying to do that. And I agree with Father Andrew that teachers do make wonderful Sunday school teachers as well. In the exhibition hall yesterday, there are several vendors out there.
Oh, God, yeah.
And one that caught my eye, and we use no art all the time, we use a hybrid.
Yeah.
And, with the direction of Father Word. But something that caught my eye was one of the booths had it was a Montessori-based.
Catherine Barkis's work.
We knew exactly what you were going to say when you said it caught my eye.
And it caught my eye because we have also a shortage of teachers, but I have like 182 students enrolled, so I couldn't go to the one classroom for all. But something that caught my eye, and which is piloting this year, and which I really wanted to get fathers on what the answer for a while, was this Montessori-based combination of pre-K, 3, 4, and kindergarten.
Yes.
And it's a wonderful program. She comes and she rolls it out, and she gives you all the supplies and all the crafts and all the things that you need to do. But it's an engaging, I don't know, those of you who are familiar with Montessori know that it is more of a, you get to do what you please type of thing.
Right.
So if you want to work on building the city of Jerusalem, you can do that. And she's going to roll out, 6 through 9 next year. But I just thought that was a very creative and innovative way to approach kind of consolidating classes.
Yeah, let me just say a little more about that. The quick backstory.
What's the name of that?
I'm going to give you the whole kind of the quick backstory. If you're familiar just with Montessori schools, they've been around for 80, 90 years now, for Maria Montessori. A number of her initial students were convinced that they could take this into the world of teaching faith, religious education. Maria Montessori is a kind of a pretty religious individual. and a number of her students said we can create a religious education world very much like the Montessori school. And so obviously it's all happening in Italy to start with, and in a Roman Catholic environment. And they created something called the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. So if you were to Google Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, you'll find an organization, you can find books, all kinds of things. And so if any of you had me for religious ed as a student back at the seminary in the last 15 years, I probably asked you to read something about this, and maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But yeah, we talked about confession, so let's, but we don't have to make it public. So anyways, one of the things, a number of Orthodox people have said, there's a really good symbiosis here of experience, sensory learning. And if you know anything about Montessori, it's very sensory-based, experiential kinds of learning, interactive, the freedom, and all those kinds of things. And the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd was very highly liturgically oriented, about liturgical seasons and practices and things like that. And Catherine Vargas, whose booth is actually right behind ours, and actually a few other Orthodox folk here in the United States, have begun putting together and kind of, as I like to say, chrismating the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd for Orthodox use. And so Catherine has kind of been busy doing this thing, and Catherine Vargas is a certified Montessori instructor, which in and of itself is a pretty big accomplishment. And she has been really actively involved in the last couple of years, especially, chrismating this approach for an Orthodox setting. And so again, it's a lot more labor intensive than what we're probably accustomed to, because you have to make all of the interactive materials and things like that. But I would, as at the parish level, and again, that's part of the Montessori approach to learning. You just don't go buy the stuff off of the local.
She's begun to offer it for sale now, yes?
Yeah, she's starting to sell some of it.
So
because
she's understood the obstacle there.
She's also, and Catherine is also offering training in this approach. Again, it's not you just let the kids loose and go play with these objects. You're actually trying to teach them with them and show them how to use the object, connected to the story, connected to the Bible, the sacrament, whatever it is. And so she's offering some training on this kind of approach to learning. And it's worth exploring, worth getting them checking out and seeing if it's something you're comfortable with. And again, and as I tell Catherine all the time, some people like Montessori, some people hate Montessori, some people want all that kind of thing. So it is worth checking out. And I mean, I've endorsed her work and things like that. So it is worth checking out. She knows what she's doing, and she's a graduate of Holy Cross Seminary, even, for those of you who don't know her. So she's trying to figure, and she's working her way through it. So you look at something and go, I'm not so sure. Tell her that too, because it is it's still very much a work in progress as to see how this goes. There are just a handful of parishes that have kind of taken it on as a project, as part of their parish religious ed work. Like a lot of Montessori tends to do with younger kids. Still, that's one of its strengths, I think, historically. But it is worth investigating. And if you go down to the exhibit hall, and you come by, we're actually right behind one another. So definitely worth checking out. Father Paul.
Yeah, Tony, first of all, I want to tip my hat to you and the department for the great practice you've been doing since the days I used to ship all those boxes out many years
You can't even do that anymore from our office. We're not even in the office anymore.
All right, but going back to the adult education topic, I found that instead of going with the generic Bible study label, others use it too, but I found that the Orthodoxy 101 label works, and people come, and then like the first couple of sessions, like we'll start in September, I'll initiate a topic, but then they'll ask for topics, and most of these are the cradle Orthodox,
right? Because
they were just programmed from Yaya that this is how we do it because.
Yeah.
But they pick their topics, baptism, then I'll prepare for the next session. They hand out, and you can do a skeletal guideline like that, and that'd be for them, what they want to learn.
Right,
We're
absolutely.
supposed to be the resources, the religious
Right.
leaders and education leaders. So we've got to provide this stuff for them. But this is one way I found very successful.
Yeah, right, yeah. The Bible study title may not be appealing to a lot of people, but you can use it to create Bible study around a particular topic for 6, 8, 9 weeks, whatever it is that you want to do. That could could be more appealing to someone. Again, then they can begin to tell clergy or whoever the teachers are, well, how about a Bible study about this or a study of that? Then you realize then it's, it takes on its own life. And again, that's where the power of adults. So, but again, connecting people into a theme becomes useful. So the 101, anything you want to know about your Orthodox faith but didn't know who to ask. The religious discussion. Again, it's being slightly more creative than we sometimes are with these issues. Secondly, keeping it rather focused. 6, 7 weeks in a row, so that way it's over, you're done. If you were terrible, then you can get, nobody feels embarrassed about stopping because it's going to end. But if it's really good, but people's lives go on, then they can stop and then you can start up with another topic, gives you time to prepare. So 6, again, think of our own lives. How many weeks in advance can you plan? So you tell people it's going to start September, the first week of September, and end by the second week of October. And it's over and done with. And then they can stop, and so then you'd start a new series on something else. Again, I'll pick on my own parish priest. He did a Bible study on the 11 Eothina Gospels, the Resurrection Gospels of Orthros, for those of you who don't know what I just said. And it was over and done with. And everybody said this was really interesting. Never read all those resurrection stories before. And they had a really great experience with it. And but it was clearly limited to, because there's only 11. It only could be 11 sessions. And so it gave people a very clear focus of what they wanted, of what they were going to do. And then he did something else that had that kind of focus for a while, give people a break, and let them kind of stop and start. Father Panaleo, you were going to... No. Father Frank.
Father Frank Colonies from All Saints Church in West Virginia. With regard to the adult education, don't assume that your adults know their faith. I've been in a couple of parishes, and I also had a chance to, I tell people I have a BS in computer science, and so I tell people I have a great BS in the company. I had a chance to teach as an adjunct teacher at Marshall University in Huntington, and I developed the course around what I would consider a catechism session. My catechism for people interested in faith is about 11 sessions. When I've covered different parishes, I start there with my Orthodox study form, Orthodoxy 101. And instead of, and basically just saying, here's the topic, we're going to talk about it this week. And I try to do about 11 sessions, but they're topical so that if you miss one, some of them build on the previous sessions, but I've over the years gotten to having 7 or 8 or 9 segments over 10 weeks because Locopus just happened to change their meeting and took over my class date, so I canceled the class. So-and-so couldn't make it. I have almost everybody's email address that's in my study, so I also make footnotes and email them out to everybody every week. So if you miss the session, you at least can stay up. It can be very simple. Take the prayer for the wedding service. Bless them, O Lord, as you bless Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah. And we took Abraham and Sarah, looked up the scriptures, why they were blessed, Isaac and Rebekah, and why they were blessed. We spent 10 sessions on the 2 prayers that the priest does in the wedding service. That was all we studied. And it was almost more information than we could handle. Because I went to all the scriptures and laid it out. And by the time you're done, that prayer that goes by in the wedding like this, they're all going, oh, I never knew. That's part of our service.
That's who all those people are.
It's just very easy to share that with them. And they were all familiar with prayer. Well, excuse me, a lot more familiar with Greek. I do my own English, but at least now it also ties them to the faith. It's very easy for me as a priest to take catechism material or a simple thing like that. And then I've also asked them too. They've already told me they want to study this year the 10 Commandments and the Beatitudes. So I'm working out a lesson plan with one commandment and one beatitude each week. This is
Thanks, Bob.
And the key here, of course, with adult learners is to give them a space, a place where they feel comfortable admitting that they don't know something. Don't, again, none of us want to walk into a room and say, well, I really don't know very much about this. But if we kind of say, we know you probably don't, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Don't be embarrassed. And create that kind of comfort zone so that people can admit, I really don't know this or that. That will go a long way in creating the kind of environment. Yes?
My name is Beth Miles. I'm from the Union Station in Buffalo. I'm the Sunday School coordinator there for the next 3 years. But we are, in a little kind of in addition to what you're saying, we are looking for something that will connect with teenagers. And if we're losing them, I think because of school, because of schoolwork, because of work, because of a lot of things that they're doing outside of the church community. And we have an active boy, try to get them on a Sunday. It's
Right.
really difficult.
Right, and that's why we created the units of study, the zines, as some people call them. And we just, so that way it's trying, again, to be focused, again, kind of using a very similar approach. A focused study on one particular topic, the liturgy, Holy Week, whatever, there are half a dozen of them or so out there now. We're going to try to keep making more. It doesn't necessarily have to lend itself to a Sunday school setting. It can be done anywhere. But the key, and this, I'm going to kind of give away something tomorrow. The key here with young people is they need to begin to see kind of the riches of the faith here. They need to see that it's going to make a difference. Young people can't just have kind of their sense of you should know this kind of model. Or you need to know model. They need to be convinced. Yes, they're teenagers, and what do they know, right? But they still need to be convinced that what they're doing has meaning and an impact on the world. And so the two need to kind of go together in that regard. So how do we connect learning our faith with service, with the role that it plays in our lives, the role that it plays in the society becomes important here, so that they can see that connection. It's just not learning for the sake of learning. It becomes important, and it begins to become meaningful for them, and they'll start to take it. They can start to take it, again, no guarantees, start to take it a little more seriously because they start to make that connection. So.
Many of our students, we have a linguistic kitchen too.
Yeah.
Many of them participate. Again, they
Right.
enjoy it. But to get them into the liturgy is, they're not.
Yeah, and so the connection to the soup kitchen has to be it's not that, okay, the connection here now there have to be connections made. So they go to the soup kitchen, then at liturgy, how do they use that opportunity to pray for the people that were working there, pray for the people that they helped, realize that there's a meal being served at that liturgy, realize that this is an opportunity to bring their gift to help that soup kitchen. So they're seeing that there's a connection between the way we pray and the way we serve and the way we live. So there's that. The third element to that then becomes the educational piece, and this is the riches of our Orthodox Christian faith playing out, is that we weren't the first people that invented the soup kitchen, and here in the late 20th century and early 21st. This has been going on for a very long time in Christianity, from St. Basil all the way down. And when we begin to tie if we begin to tie what we're doing to those stories, and our young people begin to see that they're in a long line of Christians who have put their faith into action, and that they're being like St. Basil or the great service projects of other places of the Christian world, then it's like all of a sudden it takes on more seriousness. It's not just being nice. It's really responding to the command of Christ to love your neighbor. And so all of a sudden you start, and that becomes now the learning opportunity. And then I would be so daring to say, is part of our religious education work to ask the hard question. Why is it that here we are in what some people say is the wealthiest, most powerful planet in the history of our world? Why are we still having to have soup kitchens? Something's wrong. What's going on with that? Hellenic College has the Crossroad program, and they've had for many years the program called with the young people, the juniors and seniors in high school. They take a homeless person to breakfast. You know, you tap on somebody's shoulders, can we buy a cup of coffee? And they find out, they learn the story of that homeless person. Do it in pairs, you have to do it safely, etc. Get it, okay? But they realize that this homeless person that they just bought breakfast for is a human being who had a story, who has a mom and a dad and a life, and something went maybe horribly wrong that has put that person on the streets. And now all of a sudden there's a level of impact that not only did I buy this person breakfast, but to make a difference in the world, to make it see what's going on in our world, that somebody who had this, everything I have, winds up on the streets. So that, again, to put educator language on it, the critical function into these questions of faith and life become really, really critical. And that's where the impact of why we're doing this becomes so powerful. Not just doing this to get somebody through their days, because Christ has commanded us to do it. And that we have 2,000 years worth of examples of saints in the history of our church that have been doing this. And that I'm called as an Orthodox Christian to continue what Christ did in the world. And I'm called to do something in the world to transform it. That we do these things for the life of the world. And so that becomes really important, I think, for young, especially for teenagers. Yeah, we were all teenagers once. We wanted to make a difference in the world. They do too. And so we have to kind of we have to, again, bring intention around those things. So you're going to get the last question because it's 10 to 4. And,
Pericles Malis from the Annunciation in Nassau, Bahamas. You people are doing a good job.
Thank you.
Your materials are helping, and there's 4 of us here under orders to look for new things, bring things back. But the most interesting thing I've seen for a long time, we have a new priest who unfortunately have to come back. And he started doing what he calls a children's sermon. And right after the Lord's Prayer, he calls all the little Sunday school children up, and it's very cute.
Oh yeah.
And it has everybody's attention. And then he gives them a little sermon sometimes on the saint of the day or some event, something. And then, all right, now let's get ready for communion, and then we go into continue the liturgy and so forth. And then the children always go forward first for Andidoro. They always sing something. They're learning in Sunday school something in Greek and in English. Christos Anesti, Plusievta. And it has the whole community totally riveted and fascinated. It may be my imagination, but it has attendance up. And the parents are learning even from the little things that the priest is telling the little ones. Is that a common practice, or is that?
Well, I would say, I'm going to ask the clergy in the room, how many of you give a children's sermon of some kind, if not all the time, periodically? Good number. How many of the rest of you?
Good
Does your
for
priest
you.
give a sermon to the children? Yeah?
Yeah,
That's
good for
pretty
you.
common.
I mean, it's quite
The
marvelous.
calling them up is a little different, but
calling
that's
them up
perfectly
and
legit.
they're up there, and,
It all depends on your physical plant there.
It's
how
a
it
small
works.
little church, so it's quite easy, but it's quite remarkable, and
Yeah.
I think it bears watching and studying.
Absolutely,
My
absolutely.
daughter remembers those children's sermons, Father Michael Bird, you know, just.
Yeah, my parish priest, Father Michael Bird, get your children's sermon, he'd call them up, he'd bring them things to do. I mean, it was, yeah. And of course, you know, it's got the cute factor.
Yeah, no, it
It's
does.
all the parents are impressed by it. And
Adults learn too.
But the adults are
The
learning
adults
too.
learn.
And
They
that
are
says
learning.
something about this
Yeah.
need for adult learning and how to read that the simple works. The simple, the concrete, there's a story, there's an object. Just because we're adults doesn't mean we all are looking for the footnotes in our sermons. We're looking for the story, we're looking for the simple, we're looking for the object lesson, we're looking for the moral of the tale. And so why do the adult parishioners tell their parish priest after the children? I learned an awful lot from that. It's because it's got all the elements that help us learn as well. I'm going to say thank you very much for your attention. We'll be sticking around. If you have any more questions or visit us in the exhibit area. And of course, feel free to call our office, email, find us on Facebook, and we'll continue the conversation. Again, thank you very much.